Welcome to the Knowledge Seeker channel. The channel is dedicated to exploring critical issues in the world. This presentation is titled The Israeli-Palestinian Conflict. A two-state solution is more advantageous than a one-state solution. This is the map of Palestine before the creation of Israel and today. You can see before the creation of Israel, the entire green was Palestine. Then after the clash between the Jews and the Arabs and Israel is won. So each time Israel fought with the Arab forces and the Palestinians, Israel wins, Palestinian territory would dwindle while Israeli territory expands. Today, the Palestinian territory is left to the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Here again, you have it, the West Bank in brown and Gaza Strip. Those are the only two places left for the state of Palestine. The purpose of this presentation is to achieve three goals. One, to explore the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Two, determine which option, whether the two-state or one-state solution, is likely to end the conflict and bring peace to the two groups. And three, identify the consequences or implications of the two-state option compared to the one-state option. To accomplish the goals of the presentation, three arguments are made here. One, in terms of strategic thinking, a two-state solution is most likely to end the incessant conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians and between the Arabs and the Jews. Two, a one-state solution is most likely to escalate the conflict, thereby destabilizing Israel, the Middle East, and the Western Wall, and arousing global hostility toward Israel and the West. And three, a balance of military power has developed between Israel and its neighbors, thereby diminishing Israeli military advantage. Now, these three arguments are used here as the basis for analyzing and identifying the advantages and disadvantages of the two-state and the one-state solutions to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Let's look at UN resolutions on Israel and Palestine. UN Resolution 181 passed on November 29, 1947, called for the partitioning of mandated Palestine into Arab and Jewish states. That is a two-state solution. It also placed Jerusalem under international status. This was backed by Resolution 194, which was passed on December 11, 1948. It sets up a conciliation commission as well as provided free access to Jerusalem and the sacred places in the city. It was reinforced again through UN Resolution 303, passed on December 9, 1949. There are other resolutions designed to assist Palestinian refugees. This is a Security Council meeting at the United Nations. Now, let's use argument 1 as the basis to begin to analyze and to compare. Argument 1 says, in terms of strategic thinking, A two-state solution is most likely to end the incessant conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians and between the Arabs and the Jews. So let's look at the advantages of the two-state solution. 1. The fact that the United Nations passed resolutions supporting a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine means that the world agree that it is the only way to solve the thorny territorial issue between the Arabs and the Jews. The United States and other Western countries, which are allies of Israel, also supported the two-state solution to the territorial problem during the passage of the UN resolutions. 2. These resolutions have the force of international law since they were passed by the UN. Strategically, it is advantageous to comply with the resolutions rather than oppose them. This is Israeli and Palestinian flag in a two-state situation. 3. Therefore, to oppose the two-state solution, either by Israelis or Palestinians, is tantamount to opposing international law. It amounts to going against the world. Neither the Israelis nor the Palestinians can take the risk to oppose an international protocol for resolving their conflict. 4. If Israel accepts the two-state solution and takes the necessary steps to facilitate the realization of a Palestinian state, the US and its Western allies are most likely to increase their support and provide greater assistance in ensuring the security and economic enhancement of Israel. Why? Because this conflict has lasted for 75 years and has raised the global stress level to a point where emotion is taking over from reason. 5. Due to the unrestrained emotions, the Israel-Palestine conflict can easily degenerate into a major global conflict if it is not resolved as soon as possible. Therefore, its resolution will eliminate the constant warring among Western and Arab Islamic leaders and citizens. The entire world will breathe a sigh of relief if the conflict is amicably resolved, because it has stood still for 75 years like a Damocles sword hanging over the head of the world. 6. Moreover, its resolution will drastically reduce the Cold War that has developed between the non-Western world and the West over the view that unrestrained Western support for Israel is responsible for the prolongation of the agony that both the Israelis and Palestinians have suffered. 7. Due to the economic versatility and technological know-how of Israelis, many third world countries are likely to seize upon the cessation of the conflict to establish business relations with Israel, thereby turning Israel into a major economic player in the world. 8. If Israel accepts the two-state solution, almost all the Arab and Islamic countries in the Middle East and elsewhere are likely to develop diplomatic relations with Israel, thereby boosting regional and global harmony. 9. Diplomatic relations will translate into economic relationships as the countries team up with Israel to develop and modernize their countries. 10. With its enormous scientific and technological skills, Israel will instantly become a major economic and technological power, thereby attracting other countries in the region to work cooperatively with it to boost its economy and those of its neighbors. 11. For Palestinians, if Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other hardline Islamist groups agree to recognize the State of Israel, a Palestinian state will also materialize, resulting in a two-state solution. 12. As soon as the Palestinians accept a two-state solution, other countries, especially Western states, will also recognize a Palestinian state. Already, President Emmanuel Macron of France has already stated that France is receptive to the creation of a Palestinian state. He stated, and I quote, "Recognizing Palestinian state is not a taboo for France," unquote. Likewise, President Joe Biden of the United States too supports a two-state solution. The NPRO reported, and I quote, "The Biden administration says the only path to peace is an old idea that was never realized. A two-state solution, an Israel and a Palestine side by side," unquote. This implies a recognition of a Palestinian state. 13. However, Western recognition of a Palestinian state will depend greatly on Hamas and the other armed Islamist groups recognizing the State of Israel to alleviate the Israeli concern that they are committed to destroying Israel and supplanting it with a Palestinian state. 14. As soon as Western nations recognize Palestine, hostilities will end, thereby enabling Palestinians to have their state and be able to establish diplomatic relations with every other sovereign state like Israel. 15. The 75 years of scattering, being refugees, and the trauma of being stateless will end for Palestinians who have had to endure all kinds of indignities and war, both from within and outside, will come to an end. 16. There is a possibility that eventually Israelis and Palestinians might end up establishing an economic relationship to boost the overall economy of the sub-region. 17. There is also the possibility that the Israelis and Palestinians might end up becoming two of the most advanced countries in the region with advanced scientific and technological capabilities because of their exposure to various technologies around the world. Now, let's come to argument number 2. Argument number 2 says a one-state solution is most likely to escalate the conflict, thereby destabilizing Israel, the Middle East, and the Western world and arousing hostility towards Israel and the West in the non-Western world. So let's look at the disadvantages of a one-state solution. This is the flag of Israel. Let's look at the disadvantages of a one-state solution. There are many strategic disadvantages to the one-state solution that some Israelis and Palestinians, especially Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, prefer. It is necessary to list them here. 1. A one-state solution implies the establishment of either a greater Israel state or a greater Palestinian state. This means an Israeli state that covers the entire biblical Israelite region, or a Palestinian state that incorporates Israel with the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, thereby driving away the Jews. 2. There are two ways to look at a one-state solution for Israel. That is, if the Israelis want a one-state solution, there are two ways that can be accomplished. A, an all-embracing Jewish state excluding the Palestinians. That is, if the Israelis want to create an Israeli state that excludes Palestinians, and that will make it all Jewish state. To accomplish this plan, all Palestinians would have to be driven out of the West Bank and Gaza to make way for Jews to settle in a greater state of Israel. It is the desire for the creation of a one greater Israel that has made some Israeli officials to suggest resettling Palestinians in Sinai and in any other country that is willing to accept them. This view of resolving the conflict prompted some Israeli officials to allegedly negotiate secretly with Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and possibly Rwanda to resettle the Palestinians so that Israel could be extended to cover both the West Bank and Gaza Strip. The desire to create a greater Israel has been partially responsible for the lack of progress in settling the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because some Israelis have a dream of an all-encompassing exclusive Jewish state. It is also this desire that led Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and some of his cabinet ministers at one time or another during the ongoing Israel-Hamas war to say that Palestinians will not be allowed to resettle in Gaza after Hamas has been defeated. The concern that Israel will not allow Palestinians in Gaza to return after the ongoing war compelled Egyptian authorities to reject any suggestion by Israel that the Palestinians should be allowed to seek refuge in the Sinai while the war rages on. Egypt seems to think that if the Palestinians are allowed to take refuge in Sinai, Israel will not allow them to return to their homes in Gaza. Jordanian authorities too feel that Israel is looking for a way to push the Palestinians out of Gaza. Hence, they too, like the Egyptians, oppose any Palestinian refugee camps in Jordan, fearful that Israel will not allow them to return to their homes in Gaza. The Egyptians and Jordanians continue to have memories of the Palestinian Nakba in 1948, hence do not want the same thing to happen again by allowing Palestinian refugees to flee from Gaza into their territories. The 1948 Nakba, which is also referred to as the Palestinian catastrophe, resulted in the forced migration of over 700,000 Palestinians. It is obvious that it is not possible to scatter the Palestinians because there are millions of them. For instance, the state of Palestine, which is what? The West Bank and Gaza Strip, is estimated to have more than 5 million Palestinians as of February 1, 2024. Jordan has the largest number of Palestinians, numbering about 3,240,000 people, which makes up about 24% of the Jordanian population as of 2021. Syria has about 584,000 Palestinian refugees. Lebanon has about 491,000 refugees. About 1,982,000 Palestinians live in Israel, which is about 15% of the Israeli population as of 2021. Globally, there are about 14.3 million Palestinians, as indicated by the state of Palestine. Thus, it is not possible to make about 14 million Palestinians to disappear in order to create a greater Israel. To create such a state, Israel would have to take a draconian step that most people in the world will not accept or support. Hence, when an Israeli minister made a statement indicating Palestinian voluntary emigration from Gaza, it sounded like forced migration and not voluntary migration. When Israeli settlers in the West Bank insisted on driving all the Palestinians away, it sounded like a racist statement to a large number of people in the world. There is simply no humane way to force millions of people out of their homes in order to create an inclusive Israeli state. Israel would have to accomplish such a task by being willing to be despised throughout the world. The other plan is Plan B, which is a greater Israeli state that includes all the Jews, Palestinians, and other minority groups like the Bedouin and Druze. Such a state would be multi-ethnic and inclusive, meaning that all the citizens will be treated equally under one constitution. Such a state would continue to create political and religious problems for the Jews and Palestinians due to the rivalry that might develop between the two major groups. Moreover, since the Palestinians have a higher birth rate, with families having more children than typical Jewish families. The possibility of the Palestinian population outgrowing the Jewish population might create uneasiness among some Jews, particularly right-wing religious groups. There is also the possibility that Sephardic Jews could align with the Palestinians against the Ashkenazi Jews, since they tend to share certain Middle Eastern and Mediterranean cultures compared to the Ashkenazi Jews, who have strong Eastern European cultures. Even if the plan for a one-state solution is an all-inclusive one designed to integrate both the Jews and the Arabs, there is the possibility that right-wing Palestinians and right-wing Jews might vigorously oppose the idea, since both groups want separate states to reflect their ethnic, cultural, and religious identities. The greatest obstacle to the idea of a one-state solution is that it will go against the UN resolutions 181, 194, and 303, which recognize a two-state solution. The UN resolutions have a force of international law behind them. Therefore, an attempt to create a one-state will immediately be viewed as a contravention of international law and would be rejected by a large number of states in the world. 4. It should be noted that 139 states have already recognized Palestine as a sovereign state. This implies a global acceptance of a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. 5. To oppose the UN resolution calling for a two-state solution means to oppose the decision of the world. Thus, it is like one country standing against the entire world. If Israel resists the two-state solution and opts for a one-state solution, it will be going against the entire world, which might cost the country politically and economically. 6. Moreover, Israel is surrounded by neighbors that believe in a two-state solution. If Israel opts for a one-state solution, then it will be in a state of perpetual war with its neighbors. 7. To continue to be in a state of war perpetually will compel many Israelis to leave the country, to live elsewhere, to avoid the stress associated with the tense atmosphere of being in a conflict with the Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims. 8. Israelis should realize that an extensive Israeli reliance on the United States negates its sovereignty and makes it more like the 51 state of the United States. It should be noted that since its creation, the US has donated massive financial and military resources to Israel to keep it afloat and protected against Arab military threats over the Palestinian and Golan Heights issues. For instance, as soon as Hamas launched the October 7, 2023 sudden attack against Israel, the US reacted by approving billions of dollars in financial and military aid. Additionally, the US sent a naval fleet to the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean to tactically protect Israel's marine flank as it engages Hamas in Gaza. 9. The US immediate response to protect Israel's flank tends to weaken Israel's military prowess. Why? The immediate US response created a psychological feeling among the non-state armed groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, and Houthi rebels that Israel is not a powerful military power without active US support. The perception that Israel cannot stand militarily on its own without US military support emboldens the non-state armed groups to threaten even more, believing that they can overwhelm Israel in the long run. 10. Apart from the non-state armed groups, other countries in the world are also tempted to imply that Israel is not a powerful military state as it has been portrayed in the past. They reason that without US support, it would crumble very quickly. The perception is leading to a view that the US is responsible for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict because without its support, Israel would have opted for a two-state solution a long time ago. Thus, as far as there is an increasing view that Israel is not a militarily powerful country, the non-state armed groups would be tempted to constantly attack Israel to probe its military weaknesses. 11. A one-state solution will create innumerable diplomatic and strategic damages to the US and its Western allies. Why? Because if they go along with a one-state plan by supporting Israel in opposition to the two-state solution, their reputation as the defenders of democracy, human rights, and peaceful coexistence will crumble. It will also mean that they are violators of international law for supporting Israel, which carries out a one-state plan, contrary to UN resolutions, which call for a two-state solution. 12. The most dangerous and unpredictable possibility is that non-state armed groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, Houthi rebels, and assorted Islamic and armed groups in Syria and Iraq are forming alliances. If these non-state armed groups integrate their military operations against Israel, it is doubtful whether Israel would be able to survive without threatening the use of nuclear bombs. Why? The rapid change in the development of deadly military technologies like missiles, rockets, and drones has made it possible for these non-state armed groups to be as powerful, if not in some cases more powerful than some states in the region. 13. It will force the US, the number one ally of Israel, to choose between supporting the one-state solution against the globalized two-state plan. If the US supports Israel's one-state solution, it will stand against the decision of the UN for a two-state solution. If the US does so, it stands to shipwreck the UN, which it greatly sponsored after the Second World War. Thus, like Israel, most countries are likely to shun the US and opt to join the BRIC and other alliances, thereby weakening the influence of the US in the global arena. This is the Palestinian state flag. Now, let's look at the disadvantages of a one-state solution for the Palestinians, since we've just finished the one for the Israelis. Again, the disadvantages of a one-state solution for the Palestinians. 1. For Palestinians to achieve a greater Palestinian state, they too can only achieve such a goal in two ways. A, by creating an all-embracing Palestinian state excluding the Jews. So this is opposite of the Jewish preference. This is not achievable since Israel is already a sovereign state. Israel has a Jewish population of 7.2 million people as per 2023 estimate. There are about 15.7 million Jews worldwide, both core and partial, with the US having the second largest population of Jews. Some estimates put the total Jewish population, including the core and non-core, at about 25.5 million people. Thus, it is not possible for Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other hardline Palestinian groups that insist on driving away the Jews to do so. Moreover, the Jews have a historical attachment to the land as well as the Palestinians. Hence, to achieve a greater Palestinian state, Hamas and other hardliners would have to adopt very brutal tactics that the world will not support. B, which is the other plan to create a one Palestinian state. The B plan will be a greater Palestinian state which includes all the Jews and other minority groups like the Bedouin and the Druze. This one-state option will be a multi-ethnic state including the Palestinians, Jews, Bedouin, and the Druze. This option will not lead to peace since the Palestinians and the Jews would be fiercely competitive in attempting to dominate the state, just like in the one greater state plan. So if the Israelis create a one-state plan, the same problems that the Palestinians will also experience if they try to create a one-state plan. 2. Hamas and Islamic Jihad in particular must change their position and recognize Israel following the bloodiness and destructiveness of the ongoing war in Gaza Strip. 3. They cannot maintain their hardline position if they really care about the Palestinian people who are paying dearly for their decision to launch the October 7, 2023 attack against Israel. 4. If they do not change their positions, then world opinion will turn against them the way it turned against Israel for the use of excessive force in Gaza in the ongoing war. 5. If world opinion turns against Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other Islamist elements, global support for Israel to go all out to finish them militarily will take place. If that were to happen, Iran and other Islamic states in the world would be pressured to stop supporting them or risk war. 6. Thus, the more Israel pushes on with the aim of totally annihilating Hamas, the more Palestinian civilians will be killed. This reinforces global support for the Palestinians. 7. Due to the massive destruction of Gaza and the thousands of Palestinian civilians killed in a war initiated by the Hamas on October 7, 2023, Hamas cannot afford to continue taking the hardline position against recognizing Israel. 8. If Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and other hardline Palestinian elements keep insisting on not recognizing Israel and opting for Palestinian one-state solution, world opinion will change against the Palestinians by blaming them for being intransigent and not willing to bring peace to the Middle East. 9. Such a development will increase support for Israeli military action that is likely to result in a more destructive war. At that point, people will say that Hamas and the other hardline Palestinians had an opportunity to change their behavior since the UN and the rest of the world are in support of the creation of a Palestinian state. 10. Hamas' refusal to change its view about the recognition of Israel will destroy the South African legal effort to persuade the International Court of Justice to sanction Israel for the way it conducts the war in Gaza. Basically, Hamas would use its own hands to destroy the effort to apply international law to the issue. 11. Moreover, like Israel, if it opposes a two-state solution by refusing to recognize Israel, Hamas will be challenging the authority of the United Nations, which issued Resolution 181 and 194 that support a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestinian conflict. 12. Hamas' opposition to a two-state solution would imply a violation of an international protocol that amounts to international law. 13. Such a development could compel the UN to issue sanctions that could stop countries that give it diplomatic protection from doing so. 14. Similarly, the UN could initiate a global action to sanction any country that continues to supply arms to Hamas and Islamic Jihad. This will put Iran in a very delicate situation. 15. Tired of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, many Arabs might change their mind about the Palestinians since the fault for not ending the conflict will fall on Hamas rather than on Israel. They might reason that they are exhausted in investing their emotions in the Palestinians, while the Palestinians, that is Hamas and Islamic Jihad, are not willing to end the conflict by recognizing Israel in return for the Israeli recognition of a Palestinian state. 16. Thus, in some Arab countries, hostility could develop against Palestinian refugees. 17. If Hamas and the Islamic Jihad refused to recognize Israel in return for Israeli recognition of a Palestinian state, the Palestinian Authority, represented by Fatah, could seek military support from other countries and the US to confront Hamas in order to mobilize the Palestinian people for the acceptance of a two-state solution. 18. Arab countries and Iran must put pressure on Hamas and the Islamic Jihad to soften their stand and accept a two-state solution now, as world opinion seems to favor the Palestinians. Otherwise, the rest of the world would accuse them of abetting the prolongation of the conflict by failing to compel Hamas and other hardliners to accept Israeli statehood in return for Palestinian statehood. Now, let's go to the third argument. The third argument being that a balance of military power has developed between Israel and its neighbors, thereby diminishing Israeli military advantage. So let's look at the disadvantages of a one-state solution if Israel want to rely most exclusively on its military capability. Again, a balance of military power and the disadvantage of a one-state solution. Let's look at the disadvantages. 1. Israel risks being militarily destroyed in the near future as the Arab countries and Iran continue to develop and build their military capabilities. 2. Already, Iran has almost achieved military parity with Israel conventionally, apart from Israel's nuclear weapons. This means that in a major conventional military confrontation, it will be exceedingly difficult for Israel to prevail without direct US involvement and assistance. 3. When Egypt, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Iraq are added to the equation, it will be impossible for Israel to prevail even with US support. 4. Thus, the military balance of power between Israel and the Arab Islamic countries, including Turkey, is increasingly in favor of the Arab and Islamic forces. 5. Similarly, the military capabilities of the non-state armed groups, including Hezbollah, Houthis, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Syrian and Iraqi elements have improved geometrically to the point that many armed forces of the states in the world will not be able to take on these non-state armed groups because of their level of training, experience, and dedication. Okay, this is the map of Israel. As you can see, Israel is surrounded by Arab countries. You have Syria, you have Jordan, you have Egypt, and here you have Israel in between them. And as these countries develop their military capabilities, eventually Israeli military will not be able to cope if all these forces come in. 6. It should be noted that the Middle Eastern non-state armed groups have battle-hardened and dedicated fighters because they have been fighting wars for decades against some of the most powerful military forces in the world, including the Soviet Union and the United States. 7. It should also not be forgotten that it took a combined force, including troops from the US, Britain, Australia, Italy, Portugal, and Spain to finally succeed in stabilizing Iraq after defeating and driving away ISIS. Even then, Iraq non-state armed groups are still operational, despite US military presence in the country. 8. Likewise, it took the US and its NATO allies, including Australia, Britain, Canada, Denmark, France, and Norway, almost 20 years to battle the Taliban, a non-state armed group in Afghanistan, before the US decided to leave the country in August 2021. 9. Thus, non-state armed groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Hezbollah, and Houthi rebels have now become some of the best fighting military organizations in the world. 10. Moreover, the fighters with the non-state armed groups are more fanatically dedicated to their causes than the soldiers of the states. 11. Additionally, many non-state armed fighters are more willing to fight and die than state fighters. Moreover, they have a staying power more than many state fighters. Therefore, opting for a one-state option will mean that Israel might end up fighting a non-stop war with these non-state armed groups, which have the staying power to fight for years non-stop. 13. Additionally, advancement in military technology has drastically reduced the gap in military superiority between Israel and groups like Hezbollah, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Hamas, and Houthi rebels. Why? Because these groups can produce missiles, rockets, and drones just like Israel and other states. Thus, if Israel were to engage in a full-fledged war with Hezbollah, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Houthi rebels, and Iraqi and Syrian groups, there is no way Israel can survive apart from using nuclear weapons. 14. A major challenge Israel faces in being able to prevent attacks is that it has a small territory. This means that the non-state armed groups can launch rockets and drone attacks from different positions, thereby overwhelming Israeli defense systems. 15. Consequently, it is risky for Israel to rely on the Iron Dome as a major defense mechanism because soon or later, one of the other Middle Eastern countries, preferably Iran, and groups like Hezbollah and ISIS might be able to produce a system that can neutralize the Iron Dome, thereby making it easy to launch missile attacks against Israel. 16. These non-state armed groups have the capability to fight continuously for years, as demonstrated by Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and the Taliban in Afghanistan. It is doubtful if any middle-range military power can fight alone against these dedicated military groups without being overwhelmed. And there are many instances. A. It should be recalled that the Taliban fought against the Soviet Union for about 12 years and then fought the US and its NATO allies for 20 years without collapsing. B. ISIS, like the Al-Qaeda, can re-engineer itself into life even after suffering a defeat as in Iraq and Syria. 17. A one-state solution without a Palestinian agreement is likely to put Israel in a very dangerous security situation. Why? Because a balance of military power has taken place between the Arab states and Israel. Thus, unlike the 1948, 1956, 1967, and 1983 military outcomes, which favored Israel, a major war involving Egypt, Jordan, and Syria against Israel will be very difficult to overcome without a direct US intervention on the side of Israel. In particular, Iran is a major regional military power with the capability to produce assorted missiles, rockets, and drones like Israel. Conclusion. In examining the two-state solution and the one-state plan, it is apparent that the two-state plan is the most strategically advantageous to the Israelis and Palestinians than the one-state plan. The two-state solution eventually results in the establishment of a Palestinian state, thereby drastically reducing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the Arab-Jewish conflict. However, to ensure the successful implementation of a two-state solution, the United States and its Western allies must put pressure, especially on the Israeli far right, to accept the plan rather than the one greater Israeli state plan. The Arabs must put pressure on Hamas and the Islamic Jihad to accept a two-state plan and forgo the one greater Palestinian state plan. The pressure should result in the Palestinian recognition of Israel, just as Israel recognizes a Palestinian state. If Hamas fails to accept a two-state plan, they would be subjecting Palestinian civilians to undue suffering if another major confrontation takes place. If the Israelis and Palestinians reject the two-state solution, then there will be a continuous state of war between them. Such a development would mean that neither the Israelis nor the Palestinians will experience peace, as Palestinian groups in alliance with other non-state armed groups will continue to threaten Israel, and Israel would be forced to be on alert non-stop. Both groups would feel like being trapped in a cage. Thus, the disadvantages of a one-state solution, either for Greater Israel or Greater Palestine, far outweigh the advantages. Therefore, the one-state route might end in a disaster that could threaten world peace. On the other hand, a two-state solution will end the incessant conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians and between Israel and the Arabs. So, apparently, it is preferable that the Israelis and the Palestinians accept the two-state plan so that they can end their conflict and then re-establish a warmer relationship. Thank you for listening to this presentation. Please subscribe to the channel and watch and listen to other interesting presentations. Again, thank you very much for listening to this presentation. Please subscribe to the channel and listen to other captivating presentations.